There are many conceptions about what meditation is, and perhaps to some extent they're all correct. To some, it means sitting in some type of crisscross applesauce pose and closing one's eyes while chanting Om. Perhaps to others, it means contemplating deeply on something. And yet to another group, it may mean some form of prayer. If you are looking to add some more tools to your meditation program, you may find a few tools to add to your toolbox. In this video, we're going to embark on a 3-part video series on the secret of meditation by Hans Ulrich Rieker. This first part will address some concepts which at first glance seem simple, yet as you follow the mind of the author, you will begin to open up to the deeper purpose of each concept and see the value of adding it to your program. Some of these deal with what brings you to meditation, followed by the environment and also the space you choose to meditate in. These two, while one may think that they are the same, the author invites you to explore the impact of modern society and technological advancements as it applies to your overall human well-being. And then there's also another section on your clothes. How important is that? How you show up to your meditation session. Before I turn the page, please do let me know you are here. Hit the like button, and in the comment, let me know if you have a meditation routine incorporated in your lifestyle. All right. Please do enjoy. The Secret of Meditation by Hans Ulrich Rieker, translated from the German by A.J. Pomerantz. Introduction. One of the most important spiritual factors in all the Asiatic religions is known to us only by name: meditation. It is mainly because of meditation that the Asiatic puzzles us, or more precisely, it is because of meditation that the Asiatic has gained a spiritual fluidity which eludes us in our desire for intellectual understanding. But we should be wrong if we simply gave up because of this difficulty and made do with what we chose to call our limit of comprehension. We too can obtain similar results, but we have to follow a different path. The psychological basis is the same in both cases. It is only the spiritual traditions which are so different. This is a factor which we must not underestimate. One of these traditional differences arose out of the different attitude towards meditation. While the Asiatic does not need meditation to be sugar-coated, we don't even know what it is meant by it. When we do have some inkling, it is only of a tiny fraction of this interesting subject, simply of some sort of intellectual process and nothing further. Whenever we cannot make lucid intellectual statements about the positive results of a process such as meditation, we remain either disinterested or skeptical and negative. In this, we differ from the Asiatic, who is never disinterested, skeptical, or negative to such a degree. This fact explains the undeniable advantage of the Asiatic, his much greater tolerance in everything, not only religion. Oriental studies within the last 50 years have gone very deeply into this large domain of Indian philosophy. They have circumscribed it but not plumbed its depths. The core of the subject has only been investigated in recent years, and here rational science must often be silent and content itself with taking second place to practical psychology. Wherever rational science transcended its natural limits, there the results were misleading, and false speculations took place to a most dangerous extent. The whole subject is so subtle that it is better left alone than tackled wrongly. This applies to Asiatic religions in general, especially to yoga, and very particularly to meditation. Even today, we should not have advanced one single step if a very few, had not been determined enough to investigate this subtle spiritual subject by themselves. They were not driven by curiosity, but by the recognition that it is not only intellectual discoveries which matter, but that it is in spiritual experiences that the key to the final mystery may be found. Their results, although based on the data of rational science, nevertheless overshadowed the latter, for they endowed the dead body of intellectual and academic knowledge with a breach of practical activity and confirmation, and thus made it a living reality. Such were Bhadantakarya Nayantiloka, the German Buddhist prior of Ceylon, the Nestor of the modern Theravada; Madame David Neal, the brave French explorer who lived the life of a Tibetan Lama nun for years; Lama Anagarika Govinda, artist, explorer, and sage of German origin, one of the leading experts on Buddhist wisdom in general, and all those others who, unknown to academic literary circles, anonymously followed the path of a practical realization and still follow it. Englishmen, Germans, Americans, Russians, Frenchmen, Italians, Scandinavians. All of them stepped beyond the limits of everyday life into another, a higher life, became as one with their Asiatic masters, and although the newspapers do not print it, have given more to the world than the majority of well-paid politicians. It was they who showed the way to our own self. It is in this direction that the peace of the world lies. Now, unfortunately, beyond the small number of those who are truly called, there are many who merely think that they are. They, too, would honestly contribute their share to the salvation of souls and the world, and thus we get books which, although perhaps satisfactory from the academic point of view, are nevertheless quite useless, even if they are not completely false. This is a pity, for there are countless people who, thirsting for the path and its realization, absorb every printed word which they think may help them, just as a sponge absorbs water. It is for them that this book is written, for nobody needs help more than those who walk on the razor's edge between error and truth. It is not taking the wrong path which is the greatest tragedy, but taking that which is nearly right. It is the car which lacks only the sparking plugs, the house which lacks only the door, and harsh but true words, it is half education which is the most harmful. Unfortunately, Western knowledge of Asiatic spirituality is more often found in the garb of the beggar than wearing cap and gown. As we have said, many books about meditation have been written, and every one of them has its positive and its negative aspects. Most of them approach the problem theoretically. Their authors are either scientists or mystics or both, but they are rarely sober, experienced practitioners. Those authors who are practitioners did not know how to surmount the difficulty that nothing precise can be said on these matters. And here again, the reader was left confused and disappointed. Again, he had tried in vain to make some progress and to gain a deeper understanding. What is the cause of all this? The answer is simple. The authors, however experienced, were no psychologists. They based their writings on their own experiences. However, nothing can be said about the experiences of meditation. They can only be experienced. This does not mean at all that meditation cannot be taught. Far from it. It can be taught, but it is important to teach it correctly, i.e., to adapt it to the psychological needs of the learner. A further basic mistake of these books is that they employ the psychology of Asiatic old texts and traditional ideas of teaching. They forget that we live on an entirely different spiritual and mental plane. We do not wish to debate whether this plane is superior or inferior. It is different, and that is all that matters. We have different obstacles to overcome. We have to contend with different phenomena, have different religious ideas and aims. In short, there is hardly any psychological structure in which we seem to be related to the Asiatic. Now, if our psychological bases were indeed diametrically opposed, things would be simpler, for then we should have no need to bother at all. For where the causes themselves are incomprehensible, we cannot hope to understand the effects. However, basically, all human beings have the same spiritual structure irrespective of nation and race. It is only that age-old customs have modified our structures, and we cannot ignore these modifications if we wish to arrive at the common goal. For this purpose, what is important is not how it is done. In fact, nothing is done at all, but knowing what is useful and advisable and what is harmful. If this sounds too prosaic, it is nevertheless good advice. At the start, old texts will be found of surprisingly little help, although to the experienced they may become a revelation, for these texts too are governed by the law that nothing can be said about things. This fact is confirmed time after time. What we have actually experienced looks completely different from even the most careful theoretical description of it. What is important cannot be said. It can only be understood. And to show that there is a way to this understanding must be, and is, the first consideration in the writing of any book on meditation. Every step beyond this is bound to lead to failure. A further common mistake is to indicate the right path in the wrong way. The more blindly we have been taught to accept Christianity, the more skeptical do we become of anything but our own dogmatic beliefs. Concerning the path of meditation, however, our skepticism is fully justified if no clear answer to our why is forthcoming. And it is only right to ask why we should choose this particular way, even if the way should not lead us to the goal. We should be told why this is so and which would be the better path to follow. If in this book we do not speak about meditation alone, but also about the deeper states which lie beyond it, we do so merely for the sake of completeness. The reader must not entertain any ideas of entering into them without a teacher, for he might otherwise come to grief. A lack of seriousness and of thoroughness merely produces the very opposite of all deep experience, prejudice. These deeper states, or rather their theoretical description, are the ideal breeding ground for prejudice, especially since these psychical phenomena are the rarest of treasures even in Asia. And yet we need not fear to step beyond theory, for as incredible as this promise seems at this moment, we ourselves may follow this path one day. Here there is no question of abnormal ability, but only of patience. I have known a very learned Buddhist priest who were completely perplexed by the practice of meditation, and I have met illiterate Indian beggars who were masters of it. Thus, I was logically led to pose the question of the relationship between religion and meditation, for the birth of religion represents the crowning of all meditation. Further, I asked myself which knowledge, if not the intellectual, is decisive. These are problems which, in the course of this book, will be shown to be fundamental. I have made a thorough study of the practice of meditation of the South Buddhist school of Theravada and those of the North Buddhist Mahayana, and the difference, we shall return to this later, is more than one of names. It shows the basic psychological division of the two main groups of people looking for salvation, the introverts and the extroverts. Above all, we shall try to show to what extent the spiritual methods of Asia can help us. One thing is certain. Every attempt to make progress here must fail if we overlook the most basic factor. The spiritual tradition to which all of us, Asiatics and Europeans alike, are more tightly bound than we believe. In my book, Der Yogi and Der Komödiant, translated, The Yogi and the Comedian, I tried to find the general psychological meeting ground for both these worlds. I am fully conscious of the inadequacy of so general an attempt. Nevertheless, I stand by my attempt, for it is our, the Europeans, task to clarify these problems with all the means at our disposal. In this book I have made a more detailed attempt to provide a practical guide for those who would discover the secrets of their soul. The book, it is hoped, may also contribute something to practical psychology, for there is nothing in it that cannot be tried by anyone, nothing that cannot be experienced and confirmed. I believe that I have given the honest seeker, and his number is legion, a means which, while not requiring scientific study nor involving him in wild mystical speculation, may yet enable him to reach every man's goal, that self-recognition which is the source of all wisdom and mastery of the problems of life and living. We shall not discover a new gospel, any new doctrine of salvation. We shall simply look into our own hearts. Perhaps our object is even less than that. We shall only recall what we have always known and what we have forgotten in the struggle for life, because of cares, suffering, pain, and avarice. And suddenly, from within ourselves, from our own self, there will emerge a new world of wonder. We shall see that it is not a special credo, but all-embracing truth which is lacking in us. And if we are deeply rooted in our own religion, we shall remain so. What we shall gain here is the key to that door which bars the path to our own power. Why meditation? There are people who no longer ask, what is meditation? Blessed are they. But strangely, not only those who know meditation merely by hearsay, but also those who know quite a lot about it theoretically, keep on asking this question. From this, we may learn a very basic fact. Only those who have experienced it themselves can fully understand the value of meditation. That may sound discouraging, but we dare not simply dismiss facts because they are discouraging. It is only too natural, for how could we know the value of anything fully if we haven't tried it ourselves? We can only answer the question, what does a mango taste like, if we have tasted one ourselves, from our own experience. As long as we have not done so, we have to rely on the reports of those who have had that experience and whose judgment we trust. Thus somebody might tell us, a mango is sweet like a pear. It is juicy like a peach. It has a smell reminiscent of turpentine. It is soft like a banana, golden like an orange. Its skin is tough like thin leather. Its kernel is hard and flat, and 2/3 the size of the entire fruit, which is oval and as large as a saucer. This enables us to make an intellectual judgment, and when we actually come to eat a mango, then we can say, yes, quite right, just as it was described. It might have been correct, but the mere description was no substitute for the actual tasting, for only that can tell us if we like mangoes and how much we like them. Only then do we truly know what a mango is. What was described were its characteristics, but what was experienced was its essence. Mangoes are not to everyone's taste, nor is meditation. This fact, too, must not be ignored. However positive its result, nourishing and sweet as a mango, to stick to our metaphor, the path is still strenuous. There will be disappointments in unsuccessful attempts and unfulfilled expectations. It is truly a hard and long struggle, but here, as in other things, it may be said, the harder the struggle, the greater is the victory. The reader may well ask, why is the path so long and so hard? Is it not possible that, just for once, the goal might be reached quickly? This can only be answered non-committally, both with a yes and with a no. Let us take an habitual smoker as an example, and let us tell him to stop smoking. If this smoker, provided that he really is an habitual smoker, from that very moment no longer experiences even the slightest need for a cigarette or for whatever else he smokes, indeed, when he cannot even understand and why he had to smoke at all before, then such a man could gain positive results without any great effort of patience, self-control, or time. And now we can answer the question, why meditation? More easily. He who can deal with his weaknesses in so masterful a manner either needs no meditation or has already reached his goal. The problem, in fact, is not how to suppress small or great weaknesses, but how to leave them by the wayside, how not to need them anymore. To need them and yet to control them is merely a question of energy and has nothing to do with higher development. In some cases, the total store of energy may be increased, which in itself is not to be scoffed at. In others, all the possible repressed complexes are created, which in their turn become the sources of new and generally great problems. Sometimes it is only a small step from increased energy to psychological overtension. Why meditation? Or better, what profit can we derive from meditation? If it were simply some new religion, merely some new ritual without any real basis, and thus without any real goal, then it would not only be daring, it would be impudent to renounce our bright world with all its emancipated thought for the questionable half-darkness of the Asiatic Middle Ages. Never was humanity more in need of meditation than it is today. In other words, just because we live in times of emancipated thought, we must think a little of ourselves from time to time, and in our fight to become Superman, even if for only half an hour at a time, we must simply become human. We have almost forgotten how to do this. It is true that humanity has become callous and does not desire self-enlightenment any longer. Concerts, theaters, operas, art exhibitions all over the world have scores of visitors. Great works of literature are read as much today as at any other time. Churches and temples are filled at the usual hours. Mountains, seas, and forests still move our spirit to its very depths. Happy eyes follow the laughter of children, the loveliness of flowers, the grace of animals. And in the eternal, I and you of simple humanity, we love, yearn, and suffer as ever. What has this to do with meditation? Everything. Here it begins. Here is its aim. In life. In this pulsating, colorful, passionate life which we are too busy to stop and look at, those who reproach the Buddha, the greatest teacher of meditation, with being a nihilist, a pessimist, a negativist, and other dark things, have misunderstood him so basically that the time and effort which they have spent on studying Buddhism seems utterly wasted. No, Buddhism, on the contrary, is a religion near to life, for it will and must be experienced in being lived. No easy demand this, but only those who can fulfill it may venture to judge. And meditation? Here too, only those can judge who have experienced it, whom it has enriched, who have discovered that this, the strangest phenomena of all true religions, has nothing in common with what we rightly reject as life-negative and goody-goody religious people. Meditation belongs to the innermost core of our beings and demonstrates the inseparable unity of all life processes and of all true religions. To the enlightened, it shows the great unity of our world with our own essence. Truths will appear where none were suspected, for truth is everywhere. To believe this is beautiful, but to experience it is the highest lot which can befall man. The inward glance. Someone is at an art exhibition. As if spellbound, he gazes at a masterpiece. Is it the color, the canvas, or the harmony which entrances him? None of these, he will say. Is it the figure or the landscape in the picture? Again, he will say no. What then is it? He cannot answer. We meet him again on the following Sunday. It is a lovely summer's day. He steps from his house as if on winged feet, a book under his arm, Shakespeare's sonnets. Into the beautiful countryside he goes, to sit in the shade of a tree upon a hill, to look far down the river valley into the forest, the billowing fields and the small romantic village. There he sits, forgotten are his cares, his yesterday, his tomorrow, yes, almost his here and now. Like Faust, he would exhort the moment, "Oh, do but stay, thou beauteous form." Alas, we must disturb him. Why? We ask him, are you so happily lost in the contemplation of nature? What is it that holds you entranced? And what was it yesterday when you beheld the old master? And the day before when you listened to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony? And what will it be tonight that will hold you prisoner to the radiance of your beloved's dear blue eyes? It is not something on which I can put my finger, he will answer. No, this or that. We must agree with him, for were it the magic of the thing itself, even the gallery attendants should have been transfixed, the postman walking through the meadow, the usher at the concert hall, and the landlady of his blue-eyed beloved. No, it is within ourselves. It is our heart which opens up because we are willing to have it so, and into our heart flows untold happiness, ours for the asking. Yet one feels somewhat uneasy about this rather poetic point of view. Happiness isn't just there, nor unhappiness. For how else can the spell be broken so suddenly when our friend notices that while he was lost in the contemplation of the countryside, someone made off with his wallet, or if on his lovely summer's day a snake should have bitten him, if his beloved had deceived him? We can be happy anywhere once the inner conditions are satisfied. If we suffer physically or spiritually, heaven itself becomes a hell. He who is famished on a fabulous South Sea island would rather be transplanted into a gray suburban granary where he would find greater contentment for a moment. All this is not only convincing, it is a platitude on which I will waste no more words. All my readers are quite aware of it, anyhow. In theory. Do we think like this in practice too? Strangely enough, not at all. An untold number of people believe, openly or in secret, that they can escape their suffering. Some evil spirit has forced it upon them, they think, and they try their best to shut it out. And should they manage to change place and circumstances, they suddenly notice that hardly anything, nothing at all in fact, has changed. A quote by Wilhelm Busch. "The place is good, and good the new condition, yet is the old rogue in his old position." End quote. All troubles in a new guise, sometimes a devastating result. An untold number of emigrants know this only too well. There are further examples. Who is happier, a satisfied beggar or a dissatisfied king? A healthy artisan or an unhealthy millionaire? A good-humored tramp or an ill-tempered police superintendent? Everyone is likely to give the same answer, but had he the choice himself, he would rather be a dissatisfied king than a satisfied beggar, an unhealthy millionaire than a healthy artisan, an ill-tempered police superintendent than a good-humored tramp. Strange, isn't it? Why do most men choose what is troublesome rather than happiness? Because, with some justification, they say, a good mood, a feeling of happiness may be gone tomorrow. Wealth is more durable. And if I feel dissatisfied, it is easier to gain satisfaction with money. Moods change within the space of a second. True, even riches may be lost, but usually not half as quickly as dispositions, moods, transitory happiness. What objections can we have to this? There are two ways of helping mankind to achieve happiness and satisfaction, either by providing material benefits for all, or by consolidating man's feelings of happiness and satisfaction. Seneca says, if you wish to give happiness, do not multiply possessions, but reduce wants. This is easier said than done, because even if we are convinced that numerous desires, together with impossibility of satisfying them, only create suffering and dissatisfaction, the desire themselves, which are the true sources of suffering, are not removed thereby. Yes, even the certain conviction that the desired object is quite worthless does not mean that we cease striving to obtain it. The reason for this is that while we are certain about what we desire, we do not know why we desire it. It is not always a practical purpose towards which we strive. Often we have the most confused, strange, obscure, and inexplicable motives. Certainly, when a hungry person begs for a penny in order to buy bread, we need not look for anything obscure. But when Mrs. Miller absolutely needs a new dress because she has absolutely nothing to wear, her wardrobe is full of dresses, she may do so for 100 different reasons. Simply vanity. The desire to appear rich, that is, so say, influential. The desire to please an admirer. To put her girlfriend in the shade. To show people how many things she can afford. Or simply to rekindle her own husband's cooling embers. To sum up, man always seeks something which will give him a brief moment of satisfaction, and his psyche will often follow the most tortuous paths to obtain this moment. Material means must lead to spiritual satisfaction. This law appears to govern our daily lives. Spiritual satisfaction, however, can be produced in the spiritual sphere itself, without the roundabout way of matter, and if we fail to obtain it, it is only because we have no conception of the workings and potentialities of the psyche, and because we blame the lost collar stud and not our own impatience, the rain and not our own lack of resistance, money and not our own desires, because we look for a scapegoat everywhere. We do find it, but not in its real hideout, in ourselves. This leads to the well-known attitude, things go badly with me, though I am a good man. The fault is with my fellow citizens, with my environment, with God and the devil. But where the fault really lies, there alone, so we think, is goodness, innocence, and undeserved suffering. However, when things go well with me, then apparently I have deserved them. In the morning, I have given alms to 3 beggars, helped a blind old man across the street, although I had very little time, and decided to buy my wife a posy. Well, I ask you, doesn't that make me a good man? With a proudly swelling chest, we enter our office, and behold, everything runs more smoothly. Is it because heaven has recompensed me for my good deeds? Possibly. Certainly, however, it is because a swelling chest leads to much more positive results than a knitted brow. This is the psychological result of psychological causes. Nor is it always especially difficult in serious things. Very often, very small causes, or those which we consider to be small, have very large effects. The less we care about causes, the more helplessly are we exposed to their effects. Thus, when we do not know whence they come, we become the victims of our own bad moods. If we do know their origin, and bad mood may not be dispelled, but we know better next time. We have together experience not so much of the world around us as of ourselves. I know myself very well is an extremely dangerous sentence, for I believe I can say with certainty there are so few men in this our earth who really know themselves that they can be counted on the fingers of one hand. The most gigantic task of man is to learn to know and to conquer himself, for then his success will have no limit. We do not even have an inkling of our capabilities, for good or for evil. Is it not a shame to let so many forces which are incontestably present go by the board unused? Even though we can hardly succeed in reaching the very limits of our possibilities in the course of a short life, every single step in this direction bears fruit rich beyond our wildest expectations. Then what prevents us from knowing and using these potentialities? Let us take the case of a man who is known to his acquaintances as a most moving orator. Today he has been somewhat upset, and when asked to perform, he regrets, "Today I am not at my best." Were he a professional artist legally forced to perform, he would have to forget his sorrow and simply have to do his best. But as Pagliacci had to do, even though his beloved had died only a few minutes earlier. We are too influenced and distracted by sense impressions to free ourselves from them. Were we able to do so, however, and if we looked deep into ourselves instead, we should gather tremendous forces and great potentialities. If you doubt this, try the following. It will not be difficult to recall a mistake, if possible, of the last few days. You will agree that it will be extremely interesting to know why you have made the mistake, and if the reason which you give is the true one. If the author is right, you should be able to find this out simply by concentrating on the mistake or on its known causes. Yes, but only if every thought is traced back to the mistake for a space of approximately 5 minutes, and if you think of absolutely nothing else than what you want to know. Hardly a minute will have passed when your thoughts are somewhere quite different, because suddenly something came into your mind. If, however, you look at the thought which came into your mind in turn and examine it carefully, just as carefully as the original thought, you will invariably find that it has either a distant, an indirect, or perhaps even a direct relationship with the original thought, or on the other hand, that it concerns something which, at the moment, appears to be quite irrelevant and trivial. However, you may rest assured that this latter has some important interconnection with the thought. Here now we have one of the most interesting psychological problems. What really moves my inner self? What do I really desire? What is the origin of my ideas? The more we concentrate on a fixed thought, the nearer do we psychologically approach the state of sleep, to whose notions we are delivered up unconditionally. Today hardly need mention that all dreams have a psychological significance and that they are all capable of saying something to us. Dreams give psychological satisfaction to conscious or misplaced wishes and make up for our inadequacies in an immediate or indirect symbolical manner. They dominate us while the will sleeps. If, in the waking state, we concentrate on an object chosen of our own free will, then those very thoughts will arise which the dream would have conjured up at that moment. This may either be the solution of the posed question or another matter which, however, interests us more than the whole question altogether. For, in a condition of concentration, the active will behaves, as we will see later on more clearly, almost as in sleep. It becomes weaker than our instincts which prevent it from rising into consciousness, and in its stead, strange but pure truth rises to the surface. The following is an example. Mr. Miller is of the opinion that it was a mistake to have broken off negotiations with Smith & Company, for the latter have just concluded a big deal with Mr. Miller's competitors. He asks himself, have I really broken off the negotiations only because they asked for too large a discount? Shouldn't I have come down a little in price? He now concentrates on this question, but after only a few minutes, he comes to the conclusion that his thoughts have long passed on to something quite different. They are suddenly concerned with Dr. Sarman. Quickly back to the chosen problem. Again, hardly a minute has passed when the question of the best time for this vacation arises. A third attempt ends with the sudden idea of going to the office a little earlier today in order to buy his wife a birthday present. How is it possible, Mr. Miller asked, that I am so frequently and senselessly disturbed in my important thoughts? What have these side issues to do with my important problem? Mr. Miller does not realize that the whole problem is only a side issue for his unconscious. The senseless disturbances are far more important to it, for actually the situation is as follows. On the day of his negotiations with Smith & Company, Mr. Miller had met Dr. Sarman on the way to his office. I am just going to call on your wife, the doctor had said. And Mr. Miller had thought of paying a surprise visit to his house to see what the two were up to, because Dr. Sarman was known to be a bit of a Don Juan. Then, however, Mr. Smith had turned up and Mr. Miller had been unable to go home. Had Smith & Company agreed to the price, the business would have materialized, and a vacation trip would have been certain. Yes, if the truth must be told, even had the deal been concluded at a lower price. But as for the vacation, there is more to it than meets the eye. Mr. Miller had wanted to spend his holidays in the mountains, but Mrs. Miller had insisted on the seaside, and on the very place that Dr. Sarman was in the habit of frequenting. To let her go there by herself? No, I'd rather do without my vacation altogether, but she will only agree to stay at home if we have no money. No other excuse would do. And if the business with Smith & Company doesn't materialize, then I have no money. As for Dr. Sarman, I'll get him out of the way by buying my wife a beautiful birthday present. It is for this reason that Mr. Miller had refused to bargain, that the business had not materialized, that he had been able to go home earlier. Dr. Sarman had already left, however, to confess to his wife that the holiday was somewhat uncertain. Such is Mr. Miller's position, but only we know that, not Mr. Miller himself, who knows nothing about meditation. He has simply forgotten these things. He thinks it is all due to the pig-headedness of Smith and Company. Meditation doesn't even enter the picture. On another occasion, he is sure to think Dr. Sarman is a rogue and I can't trust my wife. He forgets that with a little more consideration, his place as victor would have been assured. Yes, even where the holiday was concerned, the friendly but definite word should have been, "We'll go on holiday together." This would have been the ideal solution. The unconscious knows this, for it made the good suggestion of the birthday present. Only consciousness thinks it is so precautious and clever that it finds ways of even cloaking its own faults and of excusing them. For although he doesn't admit it, Mr. Miller is a weakling, a hen-pecked husband who would rather lose business than dare to assert himself at home. To admit this, however, is apparently impossible for Mr. Miller. Yes, even the smallest step in this direction is cloaked with lies and deception, with the high-sounding names, fate, misfortune, bad luck, or even worse, predestination. Let this be an example to millions. Aha! The psychologist will now say, self-analysis. He is right. The only difference lies in the fact that psychoanalysis uncovers past faults, whereas meditation creates its own psychological basis for action. In other words, not therapy, but prophylaxis, if we must give it a name. Prophylaxis, however, against germs for which no vaccines exist, error, false conclusion, yes, even that germ which Dr. Haya Portrayers searched for in vain, the germ of human stupidity. That is the answer to the question, what is meditation? Certainly an unassuming word for a most important matter, but it would be very stupid to condemn something only because we have not yet tried it out sufficiently, and because we suspect that the hydrogen bomb is the height of all human endeavor. The simple, let it be said, is never quite as simple as the difficult. The atom bomb has now been invented, not so the fountain pen that never leaks. We have preventative means against smallpox, not, however, against the common cold. And with all this, the leaky fountain pen gives us more trouble than an undivided atom, the common cold more than the smallpox. Similarly, we can cure the most complicated psychopathological diseases, while we are rather helpless in the psychopathology of everyday life, and yet we have the ways and means not only of healing the spiritual common cold, but even of preventing it. Commendable though it be not to attach too great a significance to error, to false conclusion, to prejudice and stupidity, and just to accept them as such, if sometimes with a small sigh, it would do us good to realize that the true suffering of the world, too, is due to error, to false conclusion, to prejudice, and to stupidity. Or could anybody honestly contend that wars had any other causes? What is meditation? Very well, says Mr. Miller, but I am no Indian yogi. I just can't do it. I lack the peace of mind for it. Perhaps the Indian yogis have nothing better to do. We city people live under different conditions. Mr. Miller is absolutely right. We city people do live under conditions which differ greatly from those of the sages who, for years on end, live in the jungle and in perfect meditation. If we ignore this, we shall commit error upon error, and this is just why this book has been written. For Mr. Miller, not for the jungle dweller. Meditation is meditation for Mr. Miller, just as it is for the yogi, but the path to it is different, for each of them has to overcome different obstacles, and should the one proceed from the spiritual basis of the other, he is bound to fail, for our path to meditation is determined by our inner makeup. The Buddhist monk is forbidden to go to the theater, to exhibitions, etc. This is understandable, For most of these monks are simple natives, to whom such impressions might become soul-shaking experiences simply because they lack the intellectual toughness to keep their souls untouched by such experiences. We see the theater through different eyes. It may even soothe our troubled spirits. We can keep our distance from sense impressions and yet recognize their spiritual essence. In many ways, however, the native monk is better off than we are, for his obstacles and also his problems are not nearly as great as ours. If he were confronted with new facts, he would have to digest them first. We, however, are born into them. Our disadvantage is that we have manifold desires, and our advantage is that we know most of them so well that our attitude towards them is quite ingrained. Thus, for instance, a capital city of another country is not as new to us as it would be to a jungle dweller who would be overwhelmed not only by the strange environment, but even more so by the many little attractions such as radios, cars, trams, lifts, elevators, etc. As long as the pious jungle dweller knows nothing of these things and their attractions, there is little to disturb his pious ways of living. Those of us, however, who have tasted of the numerous attractions of our world and who have then outgrown them of our own free will, have probably gone farther along the road to completion. A Ceylonese monk once said to me, "I do not know the things of your world, but I believe that I should have to leave my order if I did get to know them, for I should succumb to that world. I can't imagine it, I cannot know it. In any case, I am afraid of it, but most of all, I fear my own weaknesses." A wise man indeed. Here we have the difference between Mr. Miller and the jungle dweller. It makes no difference whether the attractions are great or small, simple or complicated, natural or artificial. The only thing that matters is the fact that they are attractions, i.e., that we have to come to terms with environmental influences, whether these influences are a coconut or a helping of crayfish mayonnaise. Mr. Miller toys with the new idea of a new car, the yogi with that of a new rice bowl. But for both, the acquisition is no absolute necessity. The attraction is the same. The considerations are also the same. Yes, even the percentage of what has to be invested in the purchase is the same. Why shouldn't both of them attack their desires in the same way? Provided naturally that they need attacking insofar as the fulfillment of the wish would be a disadvantage. Both of them have only 3 ways of doing this. 1. The wish is displaced. That is the usual way and also the simplest, but a displaced wish is by no means destroyed, just as an undiscovered theft does not cease to be a theft simply because it is undiscovered. No, what has happened. Nothing can be changed in it. A deep-rooted wish can only be removed by its fulfillment. 2. The wish is overcome. When it is not deep-rooted, i.e., when it has not become a psychological obsession. Wishes of the moment can change their object. Psychologically, they remain the same wishes, only their material form changes. This happens when a jilted lover, toying with the idea of suicide today, nevertheless marries another 3 weeks later. When the wife who wants a fur coat is fully satisfied with a diamond ring, and so on. People who constantly find new disguises for their desires can easily lie to themselves. They transform the most primitive wishes into such ideal objects that they easily become heroes both to themselves and to those near them. Hitler, whose personal ambitions became transformed into the apparent wish to free the fatherland, is a typical example of this. No less great is the danger when these masked strivings are found in the religious sphere, and when the wish to renounce becomes a new passionate desire. The Buddha spoke wisely when he said, not only evil passions are to be overcome, but good passions as well, for all passions are a hindrance. Surely a good deed is no less good because it was done after careful reflection. Passionate impulses are often regretted when passion has given way to objective consideration, and a good deed which is regretted had better been left undone. 3. There remains the third possibility, meditation How does this work? Simply in that the wish is prevented from becoming a psychological obsession. It is, however, not the wish itself that is influenced, but the spiritual sphere in which the wish is rooted. There's a great difference between the wishes of a fool and those of a sage. Influencing the wish itself means displacing it. Attacking its content could easily transform it. To recognize and to cultivate the ground on which the wish grows, however, means to affect the spiritual monument of the wish. Only this can have fruitful results and must be attempted. Let us compare stupid Mr. Miller with an intelligent Mr. Miller. Every time he takes a walk, stupid Mr. Miller will be cross, will get sore feet, the result of his displaced complexes, will curse at every bus and finally at every car driver by changing his unfulfilled car desire into the apparently most noble wish of safeguarding the pedestrian from the madness of car drivers. He projects his own inadequacies, his own stupidity on the objects of his environment, and thus his mania is complete. On the other hand, wise Mr. Miller has been able to recognize and to delimit the realm of his wish within him by meditation. He knows, I desire. In me there is a wish. This wish is responsible for my attitude towards my environment. The environment itself, however, has nothing to do with it. Thus he does not consider his walking a result of an unfulfilled desire, but a natural fact. The bus will not make him cross, for how can it help the fact that Mr. Miller does not possess a car? He will not hate the lucky car owner, but at worst, he will consider him an incentive to renewed and greater activity. To us outsiders, these thought processes seem to be so logical and natural that we hardly understand stupid Mr. Miller. But let us beware, as long as we consider Mr. Miller's situation without bias, it is easy to see what is right and to suggest it. It is always easy to give good advice. It is much more difficult, however, to follow it oneself. Strangely, we are never governed by our intellectual powers, but rather by the experience which life has given us. This world of experience, however, does not take the intellectual measure of good or evil, for otherwise there would only be wise and good people, and not the large number of those who would gladly do good, but cannot. Who cannot because they do not know how to use their own experiences over, above their intellectual understanding through meditation, and cannot follow that path which is better both for them and for those near and dear to them, the path which would give them happiness. It is difficult to convince those of the practical value of meditation who are absolutely certain that only their environment is to blame for their misfortune, never they themselves. Meditation will not create the golden calf, nor an inexhaustible bank account. It can, however, change the face of the world, because the face of the world is always that which we give it. If we have won the Irish sweep, a rainy autumn day will look quite different from what it does when the bailiff knocks at our door, yet the weather is the same in both cases. Meditation changes us from poor victims into active creators. It makes us aware of hitherto undiscovered powers within us. It gives us peace and raises us above despair, because there are places inside which lack of peace, anxiety, and despair cannot reach, and which allow us to survey the world and life as we would a rugged landscape from the soft upholstery of an airplane. Meditation is the homeopathic medicine to be taken once or twice daily. Nothing more. Once or twice daily we must collect ourselves. We must bethink ourselves, become human, and cease being beasts of burden. What is beautiful during a holiday may be ours constantly. And why not? It costs no money. Indeed, in the long run, it can even bring wealth, for self-possession, mastery of situations, strength of nerve, and reflection have never made any man a loser. I cannot do it. It's a flat lie, a poor excuse for our own shiftlessness. Admittedly, it is not easy to expect patience, great patience, in an era which the penny is put in the slot above and the result is expected below. But he who has no patience must learn it, And he who has it, blessed man, already has the foundations of success within him. Meditation is the surest way to healthy success in life. It is not, as half-educated laymen would have it, a somersault into the self-forgetting hallucinations, a flight from the cares of the world into a negative dream condition, a mystical pipe dream. On the contrary, meditation is a systemic path to clear self-recognition. It is the knowledge that the trouble with the world stems from within us and is not a catastrophic something which governs us from without. No intoxication, but on the contrary, an awakening from the intoxication of misguided habits to the absolute ownership of what we ourselves have fashioned and which now threatens to become our master, the world. We have two kinds of possessions, material and spiritual, that is, the perishable and imperishable, the endangered and the safe. Today we ought to be a little more skeptical of material possessions. We have seen in our bomb-ruined cities those who were once the richest and happiest, who overnight became beggars and are now extremely wretched. They have nothing but the memory of a past, forever gone, and only emptiness and despair before them. Yet we also know of those who, because of their unbreakable spirit, were thrown behind barbed wire and martyred, and those who smiled even in death and who neither cursed nor despaired. It was they who had a spiritual possession which could not be touched by suffering or despair, and they who felt no pain because they had known what it is to possess happiness. Certainly, only a few will reach this goal. The path to it is long and difficult. But should we not at least try to clarify our attitudes towards material and spiritual possessions? After all, having the one does not mean renouncing the other. Yet some imperishable possessions are surely the most certain assets if one day, perhaps for the third time in this century, we should again face destruction. If then we have imperishable spiritual possessions, indestructible spiritual powers, and if in the face of the most extreme danger we are at peace within ourselves, surely this is no pessimism, but on the contrary, an absolute yeah saying to life. For living does not mean that we enjoy the world till all passion is spent, but rather that we stand at the helm and know that we are masters of our fate and not its slave, master of our joys and master of our sorrows. For wherever there is joy, there will be sorrow also. It is up to us whether our sufferings break us or make us. It is up to us, and it lies within us. We have only to find the path. The path to meditation. It sounds easy when we're told that what is mainly required in meditation is an ability to concentrate. Concentrate is the beginning of all well-meaning introductions to the subject. But even at this early stage, the expectant reader is wont to hesitate, for he does not know how to set about it. True, he can well imagine what concentration is, but he himself has not experienced it. Since in our world of ever-changing fashions, the demand for concentration is apparently insignificant. Understanding is made so easy for us that we are satisfied with intellectual superficialities because it's good enough for everyday life. From time to time, however, concentration becomes an urgent spiritual necessity, and so we go to the cinema or to the theater, possibly in order to concentrate, but not as we should do, on ourselves, in ourselves, but away from ourselves, on something else. Once the performance is over, we often feel as if we had just awakened on the day of a hopeless law case, from the happy distraction of our dreams to our usual dull cares. This concentration on self-forgetting is much sought for and easily obtained. Yes, we need it, as the addict needs his drug. But if we speak of concentration on the self, then to most it is a strange concept in a foreign tongue, or at best a theoretical abstraction. We are skeptical because we suspect that there is some religious speculation behind it all, and because of our misconceptions, we dislike the whole idea. It is by no means our wish to denigrate the enjoyment of art. Concentration in the theater, the concert, while gazing at a work of art, in the contemplation of nature, is not quite as self-forgetting as it looks. In it, we become victims of a force stronger than the gray world around us. A chord is struck within us, one that may lie dormant during our careworn everyday lives, and every time that we emerge from this kind of concentration, we become a little strengthened and enriched. How could the beautiful gladden us if it were not within us in the first place? We only need the means to awaken the response in our soul, yet we no longer know how. We have not learned it, or perhaps we have mislearned it. We are not free simply because we are dependent on external stimuli, and if they are lacking, then happiness seems to be lacking also. Our spiritual strings are muted as long as no outer vibration makes them resonate. We have, however, only ourselves to blame for this shortcoming. Why is our epoch less spiritual than that of our forefathers? Why is wisdom more often found in the hermit's cave than in the flat of the intellectual? Because our mass soul has become too lazy to find happiness in itself. We no longer even know what is meant by happiness per se, for with every other care, this too has been taken off our shoulders. If we want to feel well or happy, we must have something which makes us happy, and this something we call our need. But was there no satisfaction in those times in which our needs were unknown? The chances are that there was a great deal more of it. This is the curse of our age. First, we create new needs, and then we try to satisfy them in the most exciting way. That is the position. Yet it is not wise to rebel against this historical development. It must be mastered. It is not he who succumbs who is the master, but he who controls his needs. Do we really need our necessities? We might do well to look at this question a little more closely. To anticipate the answer to this question will not be all your requirements are vain and useless. Renounce them and become saved. No, matters are not quite so simple, and those who act too quickly here will have to pay heavily for it later on. Let us look at it purely theoretically. What do we really need? A look at our room alone will give us the answer. Let us remove just a few of the frightening number of necessities. Please, not the most important, that will do later, but the most important, such as books, are for the intellectual. What would happen? Would life cease to be worth living? Would we be near suicide? An intellectual, for instance, who would value the ownership of books as much as life itself, only proves how little he has absorbed from them, how very much he depends on the knowledge of others. Everybody can look up references, but true knowledge is power. Let us concentrate on the thought that through a catastrophe we might be robbed of all those things which have become our necessities. And let us investigate how much of the loss is a true loss, i.e., how far it can affect us within, or rather, how much it could change us, for that is the decisive question. Catastrophes usually follow the law of supply and demand, and no one can say with certainty that he might not have to make such a decision at any moment. Owing to the events of the last decade, a great part of humanity is no longer so averse to discussing this question. It knows that the result may be very positive, for as experience has shown, we can more easily do without our necessities than we must do without them. Every one of us will have to confront this must once in his lifetime at least, at the moment of his final leave-taking. The more deeply we enter into the question of ownership and loss, the more clearly a second question will emerge. What is man's dearest possession on earth? Luther says, let them take our body, goods, honor, child, and wife. Those are our dearest possessions. Who could have put it better than this master of words? Here we have everything that is our necessity, everything that we really or apparently need for life. Which of these, however, cannot be lost? Which does not daily and hourly become a source of sorrow? Only a fool will die of sorrow for his lost possessions. The wise man's possessions, however, are imperishable. Nothing but meditation can help us here. Abstract speculations about the world to come are irrelevant, for it is impudent to ask for gods so long as human problems are still unsolved. After all, which problems are more urgent than those concerning life, goods, honor, child, and wife? Not even that of the soul. Those who think otherwise are thereby in no better position to solve it. They must tackle the problems of ownership first. Who will go to church when his house is burning? The path to meditation requires that our relationship to our own body, to our own possessions, to our own honor and family must first be resolved, not by striving to loosen the bonds which tie us to these concepts, but through the conviction that the many sorrows which our possessions bring with them are an unnecessary waste of energy, and that through a positive feeling of happiness, through natural self-consciousness, through the recognition of our own strength, we can achieve incomparably greater things. If we can do this, then we shall find that there are hardly any limits to our higher development, and that even the slightest progress in this direction may bear the richest fruits. However, even so small a step involves something rather unpleasant: the breaking of our daily ritual. Those who believe that habits are weaknesses can be much more easily persuaded. Meditation is a cultivated weakness because it is based on doing nothing, but it has very positive results. The Asiatic, we may reproach him with it, is inclined to doing nothing. On the streets of the Orient, he can be seen squatting lazily on his heels, arms folded over his knees. The works by which he must earn his daily bread may be done today, tomorrow, or perhaps next week. It doesn't matter. We certainly don't like this state of affairs, and from our point of view, it is indubitably undesirable. The sage, however, is guided by just this psychology. And indeed, what wisdom is deeper than that of the East? Do not all religions originate in the East? And which religion, which philosophy, teaches unseemingly haste? Let us say it all in a few words. It is to the Asiatic's knack of doing nothing at all from time to time that humanity is indebted for its greatest spiritual treasures. There are people who always have to be doing something, and others who never have to do anything. Both are to be condemned as extremes. Let us be honest. When, during the course of the day, do we have 10 minutes to ourselves? And not in the sense of self-forgetting, but in that of self-reflection. We should not find it too difficult to rise 10 minutes earlier and to brood between washing and breakfast. Nor should we be too badly affected if we should prolong the day by a further 10 minutes to survey the last 24 hours shortly before going to bed. These 20 minutes are not stolen from anybody, do not mean any work, rather are they salutary form of laziness. They require no effort, neither spiritual nor physical, and the result, as we have said so many times, can only be positive. By now, some of my readers will probably have decided to have a try, for God knows, meditation has been painted in the most beautiful colors. They will have decided to try it, and to give it up again if they cannot make success of it. If they think like that, they had better not begin at all. Note the following law. Meditation only begins to be successful when we no longer expect it to be so, when it has become a habit. The governing factor of the whole of meditation is that guiding star of all endurance, of all ambition, and of all success in life: patience. If, for instance, we have decided to learn a language, then we must be patient and persevering. Yet even after the first lesson, we shall know at least some words of the new language, and that, too, is a clearly demonstrable success. Not so in meditation. In vain shall we look for success after the first attempt. Even after a month we shall notice nothing that could significantly be called progress or success. This is discouraging, isn't it? Indeed, it would not only be useless to expect success, it would be harmful. Every minute of meditation in which we wait for some mystical event, for a voice or a vision, is time lost. Stop. Somebody who knows better will say, I have often read that it is possible to hear voices and see visions in deep meditation. My dear friend, do you know the meaning of deep meditation? Do you know that it is often preceded by many, many years of patient and persevering exercises? And that the voices are no voices, and the visions, no pictures? That we cannot expect any of these things because they're entirely different from what we imagine them to be. That what we hope for does not even exist in the form we expect it to have. That a true voice, a true vision should shake us so deeply and to our very core that we must first be ripe and armed for such a phenomena? Alas, my friends, this only applies to the fewest of us, for nature proceeds in slow stages. Inner ripening takes place just as unobtrusively and organically as an outer one. Yet, we never expect exceptions in the outer processes. What should we say if the cherry tree in front of our window were to bud on the 1st of January, to bloom on the 3rd, to carry leaves on the 5th and flowers on the 7th? Nobody expects this to happen, and yet the physical process of maturing is such quicker than the psychological or spiritual. What a long, arduous path it was for each of us to attain what little spiritual maturity we have. We have grown organically and never expected an inorganic acceleration of the process. It would have been senseless anyway, for what idea could we have formed of the suffering, the knowledge, and the wisdom in store for us when we were but young children? We wanted to be grown up, certainly, but that was nothing more than some vague idea. And while we were waiting, when shall I finally grow up? Time seemed to be infinite, and the waiting was never successful, for by being grown up, we understood nothing but being big. What it really meant, we neither knew nor suspected, nor were we capable of doing so. In meditation, it is just the same, exactly the same. Trifle with it as you may, the fact remains unchanged. It is a process of spiritual development which matures according to plan and can never be accelerated by force, impatience, or anticipation. Only nature can help here. Those who are patient, who, though disappointed and impatient, do not stop the exercise, will one day forget that only too natural time of waiting. The exercise will have become a daily habit. And after a year, should we secretly take stock of our inner forces, we shall have a proud feeling of happiness, for we shall suddenly know, yes, during the last year I have gained something which has become an integral part of my nature, a power which others do not possess, an ability which is greater than that of others. The second year will take its course quietly, more clearly, and more steeply, for then we shall know what is important. We shall have become wiser, more real. As everywhere here too, it is only the beginning which is difficult, but here even more so, for nothing in the world demands greater patience than inner development through meditation. All the other thorns and difficulties which may still appear on this path, and which usually do, will be dealt with in the course of this book as fully as possible. With the necessary goodwill we can easily surmount them. Let us recapitulate briefly. The true path to meditation is determined by the following factors. 1. The conviction that it is necessary to clear up our inner attitudes. A. To possessions and to the family. B. To our own ego. What sort of a man am I really? C. To the eternal. 2. The decision to act from this conviction, i.e., to tackle the spiritual solution of these three questions in a systematic manner. This means we must gain a deeper insight self-enlightenment in the form of spiritual development. Are these all the axioms? Can we begin with meditation now? Let us be patient a little longer. There are still one or two things to be said. We want to clear away as many difficulties as possible. Nobody will deny that over and above the numerous cares and difficulties of everyday life, a great many of our irritations are due to ourselves. How were things with Mr. Miller yesterday? He came into the office. On top of all his other troubles, he had wet feet, and he noticed that Miss Nielsen had again arrived 10 minutes late. He had tolerated this for too long. He had stood enough for her nonsense. Now his patience was at an end. He foamed, he roared. Miss Nielsen cried. There, now he had stitches in his heart again. Well, well, the day had started beautifully once more. And when he came home in the evening, his bickering about the over-salted soup was just a shade too violent. All this happened yesterday, but let us erase this day from the life of Mr. Miller and let him re-experience all the same once more, but with this difference. The thought of getting excited will not even enter his head. Miss Nielsen, he said, I must warn you. You know I am a very tolerant man at heart, but I want to tell you quite frankly that if you ever come late again, I'm afraid I shall have to give you notice. I really mean this, and if you do not believe me, you will have to see for yourself. Well, and now, let's get down to work. Miss Nielsen will not cry. There will be no stitches in the heart, and the letter of demand will not be so insulting as to lead to a libel case. The day, in spite of the rain, will be more harmonious, and logic will tell him that the soup will not lose any of its salt by his being cross, and after all, it was not deliberately oversalted by Mrs. Miller. That evening's meditation will be one more piece successfully fitted into the jigsaw puzzle of his greater development. This would certainly not have taken place in the first case, for rage, irritation, excitement, anger, and nervousness are the enemies of all inner harmony. True, people are often inclined to make things difficult for us, but when we are masters of the situation, of our words and deeds, we not only benefit, but we become terribly proud of having been so strong that we shall find it very much easier to control ourselves in the future. To suppress rage is wrong. What we should do is not to let it arise in the first place, for nothing is bad enough to warrant our anger. The Chinese call lack of control a loss of face. This is the most embarrassing thing that could happen to anyone, for in rage, man is animal rather than human, and righteous anger is nothing but a poor excuse. There are 1,000 reasons against rage, and not a single one in its favor. Those who cannot control themselves at all will find the best and most natural remedy in meditation on those days when they are peaceful. Their path may be a little longer than that of their fellow men, for meditation in their case must first provide an inner balance. Once this is reached, and it is reached very soon, many other positive things will have been attained simultaneously. Only we must know what we want. It must be added that temperament can be a very fine thing, and that it has absolutely nothing in common with lack of control, although this lack is often wrongly and euphemistically described as temperament. To repeat, do not suppress your rage. Do not let it devour you, when in fact you want to jump out of your skin, but don't get into a state in the first place, for that is lack of control. Don't let your tongue run away with you and thus produce even greater anger. For a situation is just what you choose to make of it, and a reasoned word is surely more effective than a wild one. This gives us a third factor in our preparation for meditation: the guarding of our tongues, which are known source first of our own, and secondly of other people's rages. Surely we need not stress that this applies even more strongly to our actions, which should never become outlets for suppressed insults. In Asia there are two wonderful sayings. One is the Buddha's. A quote from the Dhammapada: "If hatred you oppose with fury, nor war nor strife will cease. Forgiveness ends all wrath and envy, and leads you to eternal peace." End quote. The other is attributed to Confucius, quote, "What you would not have done to you, you must not unto others do." End quote. Mr. Miller pipes up. "I know what you want to say," he grunts. "You want me to think and act according to these quietistic principles? Very well, but would you please tell me, after all, I have a responsible job, am I to take everything lying down? People would just lead me a dance if I let them to do as they pleased." Dear Mr. Miller, what a lame excuse. Let me tell you something about my own happy days at school in the hope that it might give you some food for thought. We had 2 teachers. One we called Jackie and the other Bill. Not because we were disrespectful or provocative, but because it was the traditional thing to do, and for schoolboys traditions are a sacrosanct. Jackie and Bill were as different as chalk and cheese. Both were of mature years and both masters of their subject, but whereas one had a vicious temper and flew off the handle in the slightest provocation, the other was a paragon of self-control. I can still see them now. Jackie, the enraged, gesticulating, screaming bundle of nerves. Bill, always smiling, always aware what he was doing, of what he said and wanted. Now, Mr. Miller, today you're just like Jackie. Wouldn't you rather model yourself on Bill? We always looked forward to our lessons with Jackie because we enjoyed teasing him. Youth will be cruel, and seeing him in one of his rages. For his rages used to amuse and stimulate us, but never really frightened us, for a man who lacked control is never feared, but only pitied. We looked forward to Bill, too, because we enjoyed his personality, more or less instinctively. It is always a true joy to meet a real personality. I cannot remember a single case in which we dared to play a prank which annoyed rather than amused him. The whole school played the fool with Jackie, and he nearly had an apoplectic fit. Bill simply admonished, and everyone was terribly embarrassed not to have thought of it himself. For 6 years he was my teacher, and not once did I see him lose his temper. But we learnt a great deal in his lessons, nonetheless. Or is it just because of this? What do you think, Mr. Miller? Assumptions for successful meditation. There are 2 factors which inhibit meditation, those from without and those from within ourselves. The external factors, however, are not nearly as decisive as the internal ones. If the look of anything disturbs me, I can simply close my eyes. If, however, I am nervous, what shall I do then? If I am irritated by a noise, I can close my ears. But if I have worries, how can these be overcome? We shall devote the next chapter to the question of suitable external conditions. In this chapter, however, we shall discuss inner inhibitions and how to fight them. Let us begin with the most elementary third of our organism, the body. This is very important, for physical inhibitions have spiritual and psychological results, just as psychological inhibitions have physical and spiritual results. If any one of them is mitigated, then it is easier for the others to be mitigated as well, and this can only be to our advantage, because of this we consciously strive towards development, physically through sport, etc., psychologically through schooling, and spiritually through the influences of the beautiful, art, etc. Unfortunately, we must accept the fact that the fight for spiritual development is rather prosaic. Simple and free of all those mysterious yoga rites which the sensation-hungry Occidental expects of the practicing yogi, in fact, of almost every Asiatic. However, there is some cause for rejoicing, for in the first place we shall thus obtain a true picture of those wonder men. Secondly, things will be much easier for us than we might have feared, and thirdly, we ourselves shall be able to attain, within only a few years, what we can only admire from afar today. Let us begin with a motto. The greater our hurry, the longer the way. The greater our patience, the sooner we reach the goal. Our first task is to take stock of our spiritual state in order to know which path must be ours. For this we must choose a solitary and peaceful evening. Both telephone and radio are switched off. No visitors are expected. The rest of the family is at the cinema, and we are not so tired that sleep is uppermost in our minds. When we take off our shoes, loosen our belt, collar, and everything that is too tight, and removing even the smallest danger of being disturbed, we lie on our back on the couch, head not too high, not too low, body as flat as possible, legs uncrossed, arms stretched freely along the body, fingers equally freely stretched out. For a few seconds, we try to make ourselves as comfortable as possible, and then we remain motionless. Eyes closed if there is no danger of falling asleep. Finally, we take mental stock of our whole body, from the top of our head to the soles of our feet and to the tips of our fingers, and consciously, but without any movement, we relax all those muscles which are still taut. Thus, so we have decided we shall stay for 5 minutes. Before starting, we look at the clock, but in this position, no clock must be in our line of vision. Please note this. 5 minutes means a space of time which appears to us to be 5 minutes, and thus to say means not moving the smallest muscle, the little finger, the itching nose, nothing at all. What you do with your thoughts does not yet matter. All this may be easy for some, more difficult for others, and many will have breathing difficulties after only 1 minute. An eye will suddenly begin to itch, or the nose perhaps, or a fly may settle on our hand, although in fact there is no fly. Fleas, mosquitoes, and other insects may suddenly appear in the great numbers, and immobility may become a horrible torture. We give up, cursing a little, or perhaps quite a lot, and if we think that we had endured it for 5 minutes, we shall see to our disappointment that hardly half the time had passed. As we said, this is what happens to some, to those whose nerves are so bad that this kind of treatment may well be a question of life and death. But let no one despair, for every beginning is difficult. Those who can easily stay the 5 minutes without any appearance of nervousness will forgive us if we ask them to be a little patient and allow us to deal with their more unfortunate brother first. After all, this is only a test to decide the kind and the duration of our initial training. First of all, we shall decide to do this exercise daily. Once a day will be quite sufficient. We shall not try to establish any records, to be doing the exercise from afternoon to midnight by next Sunday, but shall rather set a limit of about 5 minutes. If after 2 minutes we become nervous, we shall try it for just a little longer. Sometimes nervousness ceases by itself. If, however, after another half a minute it has still not gone, then we must stop the exercise. If we have continued for what we think is 5 minutes, we must stop, for it is not the time which is important, but how we have used our 5 minutes. If everything is easy, but the 5 minutes are regularly overestimated, then this is proof that although our nerves are intact, we're still victims of an unhealthy impatience which must be conquered. But don't let us attribute too much importance to time. We must give up thinking of time during the exercise, and one day, in most cases within a week, we shall know the right time automatically and break off the exercise almost to the second, not because we can estimate better, but simply because we just know. These 5 minutes begin to matter only when they are fulfilled, that is, only when we can pass them without difficulty, without changing the position of even one finger, without the slightest wish to scratch anywhere, without feeling the slightest bit uncomfortable, etc. We must be able to break off the exercise at will and without having to do so. Thereafter, we shall automatically prolong the time. Normally, this is possible after only 1 week, but the extension is only a small one, 1 minute, in other words, 6 minutes now. Here we have a disappointment in store for those who, from the very beginning, managed to pass the whole 5 minutes as if in play, and who even managed to estimate the time of ending accurately. They, too, must abide by the same rules, must not exceed 5 minutes during the first week, and only prolong the exercise by 1 minute in the second week. There are at least 2 reasons why they're not going to be rewarded by a better exercise, but these need not concern them overmuch. We do not want to be burdened with psychological questions more than is absolutely necessary. It is essential that they follow the same path, and they must just accept this. For the exercises, the following particulars should also be known, some of which will be dealt with in greater detail later on. It is unnecessary to do the exercise more than once a day. A second exercise on the same day is a waste of time. Further, the exercise is best done at the same time of day and in the same place. The exercise is useless if it is done while family life continues in the same room. I have heard of a man who did this exercises on the tiles of the bathroom floor because his living conditions left him with no other choice. A blanket and a cushion were all he took with him when he disappeared each evening. If at this stage, when we are merely making preparations for true meditation, the psychological aspect of the matter is not very important, it is nevertheless advisable that during the time of these basic exercises, we should be reasonably free spiritually and mentally, and not brood over those things which have worried us throughout the whole day. We must decide to erase these minutes from the hustle and bustle of daily life. This is done by redirecting our thoughts. Please note, this is not essential, but it is useful to start with what will become an absolute necessity later on. If possible, we should avoid actively preoccupying ourselves with our daily cares, for this simply increases our nervousness. We therefore think of things which present no problem: a picture, a flower, a landscape, in short, something soothing and beautiful. These thoughts must not be forced, must not be dictated. We wish to recuperate, and this cannot be done by force. We can even think of nothing at all if we have a knack for it, only not of oppressive and problematic things. Thus the minute will pass. Now it is time to stop the exercise. That does not mean that we jump up quickly and show how much strength we have gained. The end of the exercise is marked by a deep breath. This must be remembered. First the fingers are stretched, then the shoulders, and now the exercise is finished. What happens after that does not concern me. It is obvious that all this cannot really be called meditation. It is merely meant to prepare the ground for it, and the more civilized and cultured we are, the more manifold our inner life is, the more preparation is needed. By means of these exercises, we shall get a better grip of ourselves, and meditation proper will become considerably easier if we have had some previous successes. For this reason, it is very difficult to say exactly how long these preparatory exercises must be continued. We can merely generalize by saying that it is never advisable to relinquish them before we have been able to master the exercise without difficulty for 30 minutes. And what precisely is the meaning of mastered? First, we must lose our nervousness, and we usually manage to do so, if not entirely and absolutely, at least during the exercises themselves. This is more useful psychologically than one would imagine. Secondly, we obtain a better time sense. That in itself is no great gain either, and for the time being it will also only be noticed during the exercises. This, too, has a certain psychological value which, in another form and in another place, will be noticed to our advantage. Thirdly, we shall have the indirect result of the first two. This seldom makes its appearance before the end of 6 months, and is a feeling that we no longer have a body. We shall not discuss this here, as it belongs to meditation proper, and after all, we want to proceed systematically. If you compare what we have just said with what we said previously, you will be very surprised. First, you were warned not to expect any success at all because that would only be possible after many long years. And now you're told of very great success at this early stage, after some weeks, even before the beginning of meditation proper. What does this mean? Well, success here is, in fact, not success at all compared with our goal. True, it is success in the ordinary sense of the word, but only because those very handicaps which we are trying to remove during these weeks of preparatory exercises have depressed us poor city birds below the level of average healthy human being. and that must be remedied before we can climb higher. If this enables us to rise considerably above our average fellow men, it does not speak well for our times. Thus, there is no hurry to change from the preparatory exercises to meditation proper. In fact, it is not even correct to speak of change. The ideal case is one of sliding over, but of this later. We should be in no hurry at all, for after all, having managed without meditation for so long, why should we wish to rebuild Rome in a day? We should not be afraid of devoting a whole year for these preparations. When it is before us, it seems an age. When behind us, it seems to have flown. This then is the fight against physical inhibitions. You may think what you will, that we consider our body so inferior that we do not deem it important enough to fight its inhibitions during meditation proper, for in it only psychological inhibitions proper will be attacked. But I have already said, physical shortcomings are so primitive in the main that they keep us below our own average. It would, for instance, be unnatural to treat both simple nervousness and an inferiority complex at the same time. Naturally, there may be some connection between them, but the complex is due less to nervousness than nervousness is to a complex, so that there are in fact physical inhibitions which cannot be removed by preparatory exercises alone. Any psychopathological symptom, small or large, can only be removed causally, that is, by attacking the ground on which it flourishes. For this reason, it will often happen that although the symptom may have disappeared during the exercise itself, nothing at all may have changed in everyday life, and the nervous system still affects us unpleasantly as before. Please do not forget that we have not even started with meditation. We have only attacked the basis, the shortcomings of our physical bodies, and some, but only a few of the internal inhibitions, and that we have only prepared a starting point for meditation proper. To those who do not know what true meditation is, these exercises will soon appear very positive and productive, and that is how it should be. But they must not be confused with meditation proper, or what is worse, become a substitute for the real thing. Before completing this chapter, I should briefly like to compare the condition of the Asiatic with our own. Are the same inhibitions at work in both cases? What inhibits us in the first place? Our restlessness, our nerves, our sense of time. We have spoken above the ability of the Asiatic to do nothing. The positive results of this shortcoming are his enviable strong nerves, his unlimited time, and his great peacefulness, which often passes our understanding and which to us may become a great experience. Imagine the following in a Western capital, Bombay, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and rush hour, as everywhere in the world at that time. By a Bombay police order, only as many passengers may enter a bus or a tram as there are seats in it. Standing passengers are not allowed. Yet, as all other Indian cities, Bombay is overpopulated. The Indian seems to like being about. At certain times of the day, therefore, queues up to 100 yards long can be seen standing at every stop, waiting for an empty seat to be allocated to them. Here I had ample opportunity of convincing myself, sometimes for 2 whole hours, of the fatalistic peace of these Indians. Nobody would think of criticizing these laws which condemn him to endless waiting, let alone jumping the queue. The same is the case with the doctor or the lawyer. The consulting and waiting room are combined into one, for why should one have secrets? If, during the consulting hours, a good friend of the doctor comes to visit him, then the consultation is interrupted. Tea and betel nuts are fetched generally by the patient himself, and then there is a chat for about an hour. When the friend is gone, the consultation may proceed. Nobody complains. Now let us imagine this happening here. We just cannot understand such things, and quite naturally so, for we are masters of activity, while the Asiatic has a genius for passivity, the most popular expression of which is found in Gandhi's policy of passive resistance. Far from wishing to idealize this completely passive patience, we must nevertheless admit that we are on the very opposite side of the scales, and that we fall into the opposite extreme, absolute impatience, much too often. Be this over patience bad or not, at least it is a token of the inner peace of the average Asiatic, his natural capacity for meditation, and his lack for obstacles, all which bring about immeasurably more favorable conditions than we have. Surely it would be desirable to be capable of repose under similar circumstances, for there are moments in life when it could be of great advantage. How many things have we not borrowed and adopted for our own purposes from the Asiatic over the years? Religions, culture, legends, artistic and spiritual elements, all of which are today considered as our very own, down to the numerous commercial products. And we have given no less. Dramatic elements of speech are easily recognized in the modern Asiatic languages. Aryan racial characteristics are found in half of Asia. Some elements of India temple architecture shown a Nordic influence. Yes, in Gadara art, Hellenic and Indian ideals are mixed. And even in deepest Turkestan, we find temple paintings reminiscent of the frescoes of medieval Gothic churches. And these characteristics can be found as far as Mongolian West Tibet. From these mixed elements, the most highly developed cultures have originated. Surely, all this should make us a little more interested in meditation, even though it is not a typical Eastern possession. The problem of our environment. When we are asleep, our surroundings do not interest us. Although they are there, we do not feel them at all. When we are awake, however, they do play a role, for our inner peace depends on them. What is decisive, however, is not the so-called true nature of the environment, but our picture of it. Should somebody tell Mr. Miller that a gentleman from the police is here to see you, he becomes panic-stricken. Is this the fault of the gentleman from the police? No, it is due to Mr. Miller's conscience. Quite unequivocally, for if his conscience were clear, he would not have worried. Thus, it is only a question of what inner responses are awakened by external concepts and pictures. Dreams follow an opposite path. Out of our conscience and our needs, they create concepts and pictures which, in their turn, will occupy us on the following day, and will thus keep both conscience and needs before our eyes. It is for this reason that a clear conscience is the best pillow. If we are alone in our room, we feel quite different, and our attention is guided along quite different paths than if somebody else is with us. This is 90% due to the fact that somebody is with us, and only 10% to who is with us. Man alone is quite different from man in society. If we visit the sick, we get a certain feeling. We breathe in the smell of the white corridors, their atmosphere. If somehow we have dealings with a school, then although we may be 90 years old, the atmosphere will throw us back 80 years. If we walk across a cemetery, our spirits are automatically damped. If, however, we enter our local pub, they become high just as automatically. And all this because our momentary locality has become a concept, because the same concept is always expressed in the same external circumstances and thus produces the corresponding mental and physical reactions. Why have we cited so many strange examples? Because we wish to create a favorable atmosphere for meditation. Before telling the reader which is the most favorable atmosphere, he should try to answer this question from his own experience. To do so, he must know what precisely is meant by environmental influences. He must proceed strictly analytically because here he can easily be misled. There's one concept which answers the question about a favorable atmosphere most clearly, and that is home environment. If we can answer it, then we have given a picture of our ideal atmosphere. Every man, even the most humble, has his particular conception of his ideal surroundings, which is not only the ownership of the things around him, but also the inner impression of well-being, the knowledge, and nothing else, of belonging here, both in the inner and the outer self. It is primarily due to inner attitudes that we choose our clothes, which are not at all, as we are often told, only for other people to look at. Clothes make a man, not only for others, but for the wearer himself. just as the costume helps an actor to change his inner self. Even the negative aspect of this question is of no small significance. The psychological tragedy of our times is not least due to the fact that for one reason or another, few men are in a position to determine their environmental conditions, their psychogenetic nourishment. It is the environment which forms the soul of the child. It orders the grown-up socially. It creates both the form and the scope of our struggle for life. And it determines for each one of us, and thus generally, the social aspect of the nation. Especially in the European West, where the gap between rich and poor is not so terrifying as in Asia, many essentials have become less important in the course of the last 30, and especially during the last 10 years. People who apparently needed luxuries have had to learn greater modesty, often as victims of authority, and to reduce their needs so much that they are satisfied with a mere modicum of what previously appeared to be essential. Satisfied? Yes, even happy. There is a decisive difference between a fraction and an essence. If I have to make do with a mere fraction of what I need, then I suffer. If, however, I know how to obtain the essence, then I lack nothing. Here, too, concentration means the renunciation of that which is not important. Man's very nature leads him to this. He is inclined to neglect those who mean less to him, will never leave anything lying about which is dear to his heart, but will very often forget those things which, although they have a practical value, are not spiritual necessities, such as umbrellas, gloves, briefcases, etc. This proves that the final decision between what is a spiritual need and a practical necessity is made by the unconscious and not by reason. What conclusions can we draw from these facts? In order not to waste our energy on the unimportant, it is advisable to take stock from time to time, even if only theoretically, of the things which are apparently dear to our hearts and to imagine what would happen if we were to lose them. If thus, by means of a conscious clarification of our values, we have gained a certain inner harmony with our own environmental needs, then quietly and deeply convinced of the true orientation of our innermost selves, we can start our preparations for meditation. Footnote: such convictions are subject to the law of constant change and cannot be influenced directly, but gain their form and strength from the manner in which we see, judge, accept, or reject our environment. Man without environment, let us assume this possibility theoretically, could neither create nor change his inner self, for he would lack an outer measure of his inner relationships. And thus the inner self of man is not a priori decisive, but only in his momentary relationship to his environment. Only here his latent tendencies can break through. Only here can he prove the force of his inner self, and only here can he make decisions, for here he has learned to measure his energy, and he has learned where he can vanquish and where he is weak. It is for this reason that it is wrong to desire to bypass the depths of life, simply in order to live an internally harmonious life. Not the lack of movement in the stream of life creates harmony, but our own proven force against which the crests and troughs of the waves break without effect. Meditation is to help us to create this force, not however to shield us from the arrows of life behind an umbrella of ecstatic half-living, not the ostrich in the symbol of the Buddha, but the elephant. And in the Indian coat of arms, there is neither the hare nor the owl, but the lion. End of footnote. In what follows, we shall chat about the most favorable external conditions for meditation, and the results of our consideration can, for the major part, already be applied to the preparatory exercises described in the previous chapters. This will not necessarily make them easier, but we shall thus become used more quickly to what will become a necessity in a later stage of inner contemplation. To him who is not yet a master, meditation will not be possible at any time and in any environment, just as the beginner in music may not immediately perform the great classics, but must first prepare the ground for them by easier exercises. So the beginner in meditation must take stock of his own shortcomings and must make to do with the necessary requirements determined by his own capacities. This he will do the more readily the more he knows that it is only in systematic progress that he can hope for success. The room. After what we have just said, it must be clear that the room itself is of almost decisive importance for meditation. Be as careful as possible in its choice, for this room is to be dedicated to our purpose exclusively for as long as it is humanly possible. Dedicated, I say, and I mean it literally, for meditation must never be considered a hobby, but rather as something as important as going to church or to a festive ceremony. If this seems an exaggerated demand, please tell me of any other reason for going to church than the salvation of your own soul. And this is just what we do in meditation. Man, look within yourself is the slogan in both cases. The best thing we can do to further meditation is to have a room. A little one will suffice for this purpose alone. To most of you this may sound like ridiculous theory, for you may not even possess a study of your own. Strange as it may sound, if the choice were yours, a room for meditation is more desirable than a study. For if meditation is successful, it is not difficult to concentrate on work, even during the hustle and bustle of family life. But if you can't find no inner peace, work will hardly progress even behind soundproof doors. Yet only a few will have at their disposal a whole room, however small, for the exclusive purpose of a daily half hour of meditation. We must and we shall take this fact into consideration. However, in many Asiatic countries, such a room is part of every house, and just as much taken for granted as a bathroom or a dining room in the West. If the worst comes to the worst, we can do the following. If we have a study or any other room at all which is not regularly used by the family, a small corner of it might be divided off for our purpose by means of a screen, a curtain, or a partition. It is important to create a symbolical island of absolute peace and reflection, one not desecrated by nervousness and excitement. This may appear as an empty phrase, a mere fantasy, but just take the case of our own bed. Do you remember the time when you were at the other end of town, when you had missed your last bus and it was raining, and you desired nothing so much as your own bed? Why not your easy chair or the dining table? Why did you have to long for just your bed? Because for you, and for us all, it is the very essence of relaxation, because every time you lie on it, you think, the whole world can go hang. It is just the same here. During the day, too, we need a place where the whole world can go hang as far as we are concerned, into which we can escape when we are worried beyond description, and where innermost peace awaits us like a loving mother. Certainly, it takes quite some time for our little sanctum to gain this power, but you may be certain that the time will come and that it will be well worthwhile. Please be careful not to take any cares into it. In the beginning, this is discouragingly difficult, but we shall return to this question later on. Here, we only wish to deal with the material preparations. Let us assume that a small room is at our disposal, and let us now adapt it to our purposes. This would be simple if all requirements were at hand. Simple, yes, but it can't be done. Nothing here must affect our soul, which has become an everyday concept. Nothing which could recall any previous use, unless the objects had been holy even before, such as a prayer book, a hymn book, a crucifix, or similar object. No chair, no table. What good would they do? We shall sit on the floor. Of course, we shall need something to make squatting on the floor more comfortable. But of this later. We need only one thing, and although many of you will not agree with me, I do know why I say it. A small Buddha. Why? For quite some time to come we shall be bothered by external thoughts and cares, and it might happen only too easily that they so overwhelm us that we start brooding and forget the real purpose of our being here. We need a monitor who shows us the way to better thinking and whose deep inner peace becomes our guiding star. Meditation is a part of all religions, but no one has realized this more than Gautama Buddha. He considered meditation for the sake of transcendental results as useless, for as he said, "What good is it to know the universe if I cannot make peace with my inner self? What good is it to look for gods if I do not even know what takes place in my soul?" It is he who taught mankind the way of the sources of consciousness, taught it to recognize what is responsible for sorrow and suffering, taught it to ask consistently for the causes and not to blame fate for man's own inadequacies. You can do it, he said, therefore do it. I have shown you the way, for I have followed it myself. You are not the victims of an external law, but of internal causes. Humanity has come to appreciate the essence of his wisdom during the 2,500 years of the existence of his teaching, which has given man its simplest and most symbolic expression in the image of the great teacher himself. This image does not claim to be a monument to his own person, but makes the far greater claim that it is the symbolical expression of his wisdom and of his great peacefulness, which, in his own life and by realizing his own doctrine in himself, he made a practical reality. Never and nowhere is the image meant to be an icon. Those who are deeply rooted in their own religion and would not even think of becoming converts to Buddhism need never fear that they would be accepting another religion and thus committing a sin against their own, for nobody expects them to pray to the Buddha. Indeed, to do so would not only outrage their own convictions, but would run counter to the teachings of the Buddha himself. Our Buddha image is meant only to irradiate us with the wise reflection of many centuries which have gone into the form of his image: spiritual peace, sublimity, inner integrity, the material embodiment of meditation. It is not important that we become converted to his teachings and by adopting his intellectual principles merely create a twilight state between inexperienced religion and semi-spiritual philosophy. In any case, we must avoid making the most common blunder of the West, which consists of dissecting everything down to the finest detail intellectually, and then to consider the human being simply as a well-functioning machine with nothing behind the works, whose glandular functions represent the last word in knowledge. We do not want to consider our Buddha image as an image, but as a symbol of what we wish to become. This changes nothing in our religion, just as it changes nothing in our family life. Yet, even if one day it should change anything in our religion, then it is certainly not the fault of the image. It is due to quite different causes. I need not stress that I am not addressing Buddhists here, but I can see no reason why all books about meditation have to start from the standpoint of the Buddhist, as if millions of Christians did not have the same need for inner peace. The Buddha has never said, "I have created a new religion," and in principle has done no more than to show mankind the best path to the sources of its own freedom. Never did he forbid non-believers to follow this path. Never has he made the practice of his teaching dependent on religious beliefs. We shall place this small Buddha a little above us so that while we are seated, the entire figure can enter our field of vision whenever necessary. A few quiet, beautiful pictures, perhaps a landscape by Turner, an etching by Durer or Rethel, a painting of a flower by Mier. This is all our small sanctuary will contain. Apart from a vase, for whenever possible, we shall have fresh flowers in our room. I need hardly stress that the room must always be spotlessly clean. In a clean room, it is much easier to have clean thoughts. This cleaning must be done by ourselves every day. Mr. Miller shakes his head. And in this empty room, you expect me to feel at home? If there isn't even a shred of comfort, I shall be afraid every time I have to enter it. We have nothing against comfort, but would fate itself listen to this objection before cruelly forcing us to do without it? It is just for this reason that we want the very minimum of those things which we may lose at any moment. It is just because we want to learn how to be at home in our innermost selves rather than amongst the furniture of our house. We want to learn what it means to be at home, without clutching at the easy chair, the library, the radio, the newspaper, or the coffee table. These things will never lose their significance in our everyday life just because we gain a much deeper understanding of the meaning of home. Rather, shall we learn to estimate their true value far more correctly. It is less dangerous to rejoice in possessions and yet to renounce them with a smile when necessary. To own something must not mean to be irretrievably lost in it. Once upon a time, there lived in Beijing a great connoisseur and collector, the wise Wu. One day the merchant Wei came to visit him, for they were childhood friends, and the wise Wu showed his collection to the merchant Wei. "This," he said, pointing to a colorful dragon the size of a crocodile, made of the finest porcelain. "This is my proudest possession. Look, it is the finest and rarest of porcelains ever to have been fired in the Middle Empire. And I will confide to you that in the whole world there are only two of these extremely valuable dragons, this one here and the Emperor's. Each of them, please do be seated, my friend, is worth 150,000 yen. The merchant Wei, who had never heard of so vast a sum of money, for he was a modest merchant, got such a fright that he collapsed, and unfortunately in falling he broke the valuable dragon, which splintered into 150,000 fragments. From this moment on, said the wise Wu, smiling painfully, the dragon of the Emperor will be worth 300,000 yen. In our meditation room, we shall be at a distance from things and the world, and this distance we shall shape into a living space. For as soon as our own intellect begins to become crystal clear, we shall recognize that the things of our environment, however helpful, are never part of ourselves. I say we recognize it. We do not need to try to convince ourselves of it, for this is one of the most basic results of meditation. Truth is recognized by itself alone, and to find it nothing is needed but a receptive heart. Who, however, would believe that truth could flow in an unclean vessel? Meet me at the next video where we're going to look at other topics that are just as important, such as the right posture for meditation, some of the preparations to get to meditation, and observing your breath.